Good morning, first grade. I hope everyone's having a nice day so far. Today, we are going to continue talking about Gilberto and the wind. And if you remember last week during one of our live classes, we read the story for the first time and we noticed and wondered and shared some of the questions that we had about the text. And today, we're going to focus on that next step that we normally do when we read a story. We notice and wonder first, and then we take a little bit closer of a look, a little deeper dive, and try to figure out what is happening in a story. So, what is happening in Gilberto and the Wind is our one bite of pizza question. And we're still working to answer, how do characters respond to the powerful force of the wind? And I just wanted to really quickly talk about this word respond. Have you heard that word before? Yeah, maybe. Do you know what it means? Yeah. So respond means your reaction to something or your feelings about something happening or about someone doing something. So we're going to be reading a few stories coming up where we'll be talking about how the character responds or reacts and the feelings that they have about the wind. So I just wanted to bring that to our attention for just a moment. But back to the what is happening in Gilberto and the Wind. And if you remember back when we read Tomas and Anna and that book woman, we used a certain tool to help us organize the story elements, right? Do you remember our story stones? Yeah, right. Do you remember what that was called when we had the boxes and we would write the different elements? Yeah, that's right, a story map. So I want you to take a look at this story map and think about the ones that we've used in the past. What do you notice about this story map? Yeah, it looks a little different, right? For one, it doesn't have the pictures. You're right. That's one thing that's different. But do you notice anything, especially in this area, that is a little different? Yeah, it doesn't have a section for the problem or the resolution. And instead, it says events. It says events. So the events in a story, or really the events for anything, are the things that happened. And usually, when we're talking about the events in a story, we talk about them in the order that they happened. And sometimes there are stories like Gilberto where there isn't a clear cut problem and resolution. And in that case, when there isn't a set problem or a resolution that, the story begins with the character having this problem, they take steps to solve the problem, and then by the end of the story, it's resolved. A lot of stories are like that, but not every single story. So in the case of Gilberto, where there isn't a set problem and resolution, instead we can think about what are the events, what are the things that are happening in the order that they happen in this story. And we'll see at the end of today's lesson, even when there is a problem and a resolution, there are still events that happen where, the problem happens, the character responds in some way to the problem, has certain feelings about the problem, maybe takes steps to solve the problem, and then we get to the resolution. So even in stories with a problem and resolution, there are still events. So let's start filling out this story map. So characters. Who is a character in Gilberto and the Wind? Yeah, were you thinking Gilberto? Yeah, exactly. He is definitely a character in this story. Now, let's think about the wind. Do you think the wind is a character? What do you think? And if you think it is or you think it's not, do you have any evidence to support what you think? What do you think? Are you thinking the wind could be a character? Yeah, when I think about what characters do, I know that they usually have a name and they usually do things in the story. They're part of the events. And if I look here, I notice that when they write wind, it's always written with a capital letter, even in the story. And that makes me think that the wind is almost acting as a character in this story. And even though, normally the wind is, not alive like an animal or a person would normally be if it was a character, the wind is almost taking on the qualities or the characteristics of a person or an animal. And we can say, I think there is evidence to support that it is a character in the story. All right, so we're going to add that to our story map. All right, let's think about the setting. So looking at your copy of the book, the setting in Gilberto and the Wind, what do you think is the setting? Think about that for a minute. Where is this happening? Remember, the setting is where and when a story takes place. What do you think? Yeah, right. I think that, most of the story is taking place outside of Gilberto's house, and I think it's also taking place inside, right? There are some parts, and, in the beginning, he is inside when the wind, calls to him. So I would say both outside and inside Gilberto's house. All right, very good. So we have the characters and the setting, and now we come to the events. So let's take a look at the book. Okay, and we are at the book now. So feel free if you want to pause and grab your copy of Gilberto, but let's go through and take a look at what is happening, the events. Let's first go. Here we go. So it says, I hear wind whispering at my door. You, you, he whispers. You. So I get my balloon and I run out to play. So here we look at this first part, the very first page. The wind is whispering to Gilberto, and he's going to go outside and play. This is really the first kind of big event that happens. And I think that this part here also helps to support the evidence that the wind is acting as a character in this story, right? It's talking to, in its own way, Gilberto. All right, so that would be the first event. Let's keep reading and think about what happens on these pages. At first, wind is gentle and floats my balloon around in the air, but then with a jerk, he grabs it away and carries it up to the top. Just making it a little bigger for us. Carries it up to the top of a tree. Wind, oh wind, I say, blow it back to me, please. But he won't. He just laughs and whispers, you. Wind loves to play with the wash on the line. He blows the pillow slips into balloons and shakes the sheets and twists the apron strings. And he pulls out all the clothespins that he can. Then he tries on the clothes, though he knows they're too small. So again, we're seeing where the wind is acting almost, human-like and has these human-like characteristics, even though we know, the wind can't really be wearing these clothes. They're just saying that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, so then let's take a look here. And wind loves umbrellas. Once I took one out in the rain. He tried to take it away from me. And when he couldn't, he broke it. So we see this interaction going on back and forth between Gilberto and the wind. So what were the main events that happened on these pages? If I kind of flip through and think about it, the wind takes the balloon. The wind, messes up all the laundry that was hanging on the line, and he breaks Gilberto's umbrella, right? Those were the big events. Let's look at the next section. If the gate in the pasture is left unlatched, Wind plays with that too. He opens it up, then bangs it shut, making it squeak and cry. Wind, oh wind, I say, and I go and climb on. Give me a ride. But with me on the gate, it is too heavy. Wind can't move it at all. When the grass is tall in the meadow, Wind and I like to race. Wind runs ahead and comes back and starts over. But he always wins because he just runs over the top of the grass and I have to run through it and touch the ground with my feet. Okay, keep reading. When the big boys on the hill have kites to fly, Wind helps them out. Wind carries their kites way up to the sky and all around. But when I have a kite, Wind won't fly at all. He just drops it. Wind, oh, Wind, I say, I don't like you today. All right, so if we think back to this section that we just read, again, it's this back and forth, and the Wind plays with the gate, but Gilberto, it won't move when he's on it. They race in the grass, right? They race in the grass, and then the Wind drops Gilberto's kite. Okay, so those were the main events on this section in this part of the text. Let's look at another part. When the apples are ripe in the fall, I run with Wind to the pasture and wait under the tree, and Wind always blows one down for me. So here we see the Wind doing something that Gilberto is happy about, right? It seems like it's kind of this back and forth, right? He got the balloon stuck, but they race in the grass. He won't move the gate when Gilberto's on it. He broke his umbrella, but here he knocks an apple down for him, or the Wind knocks an apple down. So it's kind of this back and forth between the two of them. All right, let's look at the next part. And when I have a boat with a paper sail, Wind comes and sails it for me, just as he sails big sailboats for sailors on the sea. Again, Wind doing something that Gilberto wants to happen. And lastly, and when I have a pinwheel, Wind comes and plays too. First I blow it myself to show him how, then I hold it out or hold it up, and Wind blows it for me. And when he blows it, he turns it so fast that it whistles and sings, and all I can see is a blur. So in this section, we see that the Wind gets the apples down for Gilberto, the Wind sails his toy boat, and he helps him play with this pinwheel toy. Okay, so those were all things that Gilberto was happy about, that he wanted the Wind to do. All right, let's look at one last part of the text. Wind likes my soap bubbles best of all. He can't make the bubbles, I have to do that, but he carries them way up into the air for the sun to color. Then he blows some back and makes me laugh when they burst in my eyes or on the back of my hand. When the leaves have fallen off the trees, I like to sweep them into a pile, but then Wind comes along, and just to show that he can sweep without a broom, Wind scatters the leaves all about again, and he blows the dirt in my face. So again, now this is, again, something that Gilberto doesn't really like. Sometimes Wind is so strong he starts breaking the trees and knocking down fences. Then I'm afraid. I run in the house and lock the door. And when Wind comes howling after me and tries to squeeze in through the keyhole, I tell him, no. But then comes a day when Wind is all tired out. Wind, I whisper. Oh, Wind, where are you? Shh, answers Wind, and he stirs one dry leaf to show where he is. So I lie down beside him, and we both go to sleep under the willow tree. Okay, so in this section, we see that Gilberto and the Wind play with bubbles. Gilberto sweeps the leaves, but then the Wind blows the dirt up in his face. The Wind breaks the trees and the fences, and then Gilberto gets scared and goes inside. And then finally, they take a nap together at the end. All right, so those were all of the events. Let's go back to our story map. And I have added them all in. And these are all of the big events that happened throughout the story, Gilberto and the Wind. Now, what I would like you to do, and I know this is a lot, and I know this is more than what we normally include on a story map, but what I would like you to do is try using this story map, and I'll include it on the Seesaw page, to retell what has happened in this story. Okay, so I know it's a lot, but just kind of think about, can you use these events to say, there once was a little boy named Gilberto, and the wind asked him to come outside to play. And, we're using both the characters and the setting in that kind of setup. And then, you can include going through the events, right? First, the wind is, gentle with the balloon, but then he gets it stuck in the tree. He plays with the laundry and breaks the umbrella. Then the wind opens the gate, but Gilberto can't, it won't move when Gilberto's on it. Then Gilberto and the wind race in the grass, but then he drops his kite but then he brings down an apple. He helps sail his boat. They play with the pinwheel and bubbles. Then Gilberto sweeps up the leaves, but the wind blows them in his face. The wind breaks down the tree or breaks the trees and knocks the fences, which scares Gilberto. And then they take a nap together at the end. So that would be an example of using the story map. And like I said, I know it's a lot, but we're focusing, on really hitting on all the main events that happened. And here are all the main events that happened. You could also look through your copy of the book and use that to help you in this type of retelling, where you're just kind of flipping through, and even using the illustrations could help you with the retell. And again, this will be a little bit longer than when we've done retells in the past with just problem and resolution, because there are a lot more events to cover. But just think about using this to help you remember that, we have characters, setting, and then problem, responses, and resolution. But in this story, there is not a set problem and resolution. It's just sort of this back and forth between the wind doing things that Gilberto likes, and then the wind doing things that Gilberto does not like. So again, feel free to use the text and the story map to help you retell all those events that we just went through, okay? Just like the example that I just said, okay? And then that will be your response on Seesaw. You can just use the microphone to record yourself retelling, and let me know if you have any questions. I know this is a little different using the events. It's a little longer, a little bit more, but just try your best, as I always say, and I look forward to hearing your story retells, and I hope you enjoyed the story. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.